Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds. I'm the Nerdist Dave. Today I have Paul Siegel with me from Wandering DM. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. So, you had reached out to me a little while ago and we started chatting. And you guys have some really cool things going on. You have a kind of a baby channel over there, but you've been a blogger for quite some time.
Yeah, that's true. That's my streaming partner Dan and I, Dan Delta Collins, have both been writing blogs for over 10 years each. And yeah, we started our channel because we used to go to conventions together, and we would spend the in between hours just chatting about everything and anything D&D related. And some of our friends started saying, "You guys should have a podcast." We're a little too lazy to put together a podcast, but eventually we got the stream going. So that's how Wandering DM started, and that's yeah.
It's almost like a rite of passage for middle-aged white guys to have a podcast anyway, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it helps make the podcast interesting to others. Is that we're really first and foremost doing it for ourselves, right? That we just love to talk to each other and talk about D&D. And it's been super helpful now with everybody being trapped in their houses to have that outlet and be able to continue talking to each other. And if anything, we have more shows now. We've really doubled down. We have about 4 different shows on the channel running right now. Wandering DMs our Sunday afternoon chat where the two of us just talk about D&D, much as you and I are doing right now. We do some live play shows. There's a show called 10 Dead Rats on Thursday evenings, and the two of us play solo games on Tuesday nights, and Dan does some wargaming on Saturday nights.
Nice. So yeah, you're filling out the roster nicely.
Yeah.
And you guys you're doing really well. You've had a couple big names on your channel already. You want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we've had, with our second season of our talk show, we started reaching out to special guests to have guests come on, and I've had some fair amount of success getting folks. We've had Joe Manganiello, and we had Ernie Gygax on recently, and should have Ari Salvatore on actually sometime fairly soon.
Yeah. So when, as someone who goes out and seeks to get people on a show, I was super impressed when I saw the roster, and I'm like, "How did you get Joe on?"
Yeah,
and then you just totally opened with a total power move when we were talking beforehand.
Yeah, it's all the network, right? It's who you know. So I met Joe via Ari Salvatore, and I met Ari Salvatore via my day job in video games. I used to work for the company 38 Studios. We were working on an MMO, and he was doing all the writing for it. And turns out he lives super local to me and likes to play D&D, much like me. So I started playing regularly with him and his group. And one day he invited Joe Manganiello over, and that's how I met Joe.
There's a little lighthearted ribbing going on in the chat, which is super cool. Were you a fan of RA before?
Oh, absolutely. When I started going to his game, I was super nervous that I was just going to come across as a ridiculous fanboy, and it's even after having worked with him for several years, I was still like, oh geez, I can't believe I'm here. That wore off pretty quickly, honestly. Bob, as we call him, is a pretty laid back guy and a lot of fun to play with, and a great DM. And frankly, is just super fun to play with.
Yeah. Man, so one of my struggles having done this and be talking about D&D and sometimes being harsh about the things that we really love is then you start meeting the people that are directly involved, and it kind of changes your perspective, or you're kind of like, oh man, I was kind of a jerk. RA is definitely one of those areas where we grew up reading all those books and loving those books, and then getting disenchanted at some point. And we kind of like, we actually appreciate his non-Dritz work way more than the Dritz work at this point.
Yeah. After 38 Studios, the company we were working for, collapsed around 2012, he and his sons worked together on their own RPG based on his work called Demon Wars. And actually, when I joined the group, that's what we were playing. So we've played that, and we've played some 5th edition D&D as well. But we actually spend a good chunk of time, because the group includes his son Gino as well, and we will often play test stuff they're working on.
That's super cool, and that is one of the other worlds that we were talking. I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We love that the Demon War saga. It was great stuff, and then the other stuff with Gino Hammer Thrower. This is from the I believe it's a Spear Wielder's Tale. It's going back quite a few years, but yeah, that stuff was so fun.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I mean, I have some of Bob's really early work from when I was like 12, which is embarrassingly inscribed by my mom, who gave it to me for Christmas. And so I keep thinking I should really bring that over and get him to sign it as well, and show my mom. She would be super proud.
Oh wow, yeah, that is pretty cool. Say BK Dan wants to know where we can find Wandering DMs on YouTube's and somewhere other. There is a pinned comment as usual. Just check there, and there will be plenty of links for you to go paw through the interwebs on.
Excellent. Please do.
Absolutely. So, what do you enjoy about Wandering DMs? Because you said you have the talk show, you also have actual plays.
Yeah.
Do you have one thing that you like doing above the others?
It's all different and all interesting. It started with the talk show, which for me is really the most fun. And especially, I hate to say it, but it's actually the most fun when it's just me and Dan, and we don't have some celebrity guest where we're trying to impress them or not sound like idiots, right? When it's just the two of us, we often get drawn into really deep conversation. Dan has a very academic background. He's a professor down in New York, and he did a lot of deep diving on original edition Dungeons and Dragons, the old white box 1974 edition. That's his jam. And so we get really deep into the history. Back when we were writing our blogs, we did a series called Through the Ages, where we would take a spell and we would examine how it changed from edition to edition of D&D. And it's really, really fascinating. I think it's one of the things that still gets the most hits on my blog, actually, is actually the silent spell.
Yeah, that's kind of something that we kind of jam onto a lot, because we played, like, I started in 1st edition and Ted started in 2nd edition. And it's hard for us to talk about anything that's going on now without like going back and looking at like kind of the evolution, right?
Yeah.
And I imagine you guys totally get it, because it's what you guys have been doing.
It's really fascinating, and even though we're both a bit older and have been playing the game, since forever, neither one of us had actually played that original White Box 74 edition, and we're really not really aware of it, frankly, until around 2008 when Gary died. And at that point, Dan started digging into the history. So to go back to that original source and read it is really fascinating.
Did you guys go back and play it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's actually still our favorite edition to play, and so we often play it.
Okay, so you guys, 1E or the white box?
The white box, yeah.
So what is different from the white box to first?
That's an excellent question. So the white box is much simpler, I would say. If you followed sort of the 80s era split of like basic D&D and advanced D&D, I always look at those as my instinct from reading them is that they're really about different audiences. That AD&D was really playing towards folks who were active in the tournament scene, going to a lot of conventions, and really wanted like a Bible that explicitly declares the rules for every possible situation. Whereas original D&D, the white box, and then eventually its evolution into the basic line, really tries, I think, harder to be a toolkit for you to build your own game, right? It talks a lot about enabling the DM to make calls or to twist rules to adapt things to how they want to play.
So, what are you guys playing now?
What are we playing right now?
Yeah.
So a couple different things. I really, I'm almost embarrassed to admit what an addict I am and how many different games I'm playing in. So I play 5th edition with Ari Salvatore, which we discussed. That's not with Dan. Dan and I play on Tuesday nights. We play this thing that we've just been calling Wandering DMs Plays Solo, which started with us getting the old OD&D solo modules. If you ever played any of those, like the M Solo or the X Solo adventures, with just the two of us playing it, sort of almost like D&D plus choose your own adventure book kind of thing. And we just started playing those, as well as the O series, which is designed for one-on-one, one DM and one player. So we played a bunch of those, all using original edition. And you can see those on our channel. It usually takes us maybe 3 or 4 sessions to get through one of those, and then we move on to the next thing. Although recently, actually, we've been dabbling in Call of Cthulhu. That's our current solo game that we're playing, with me DMing for him.
So, how many characters have you gone through playing those games?
A lot. Oh my gosh, a lot. Actually, that's another very popular. I think pinned on my blog is when I was very actively running an OD&D. Actually, it was originally BX, Moldvay basic D&D. I made this blog post about that was just sort of the death roll, all the characters that had died and what had killed them, and I kept that going for maybe 2-3 years, and it's really long. There's probably a good 50 entries in there.
That is a huge difference between gaming now and then.
Yeah.
Like you just expected to get your characters would die. Here that now we're like really precious with the characters, and it's like, oh, it has to have a special meaning when your character dies and story elements, and before it was like, nope, you just died.
I feel like that's like a major shift, right, from like maybe first, second edition era into like third edition and later, where in the later editions you're really focused on the story being the evolution of a character, right? You're really invested in this one character and how they change or how they, how they behave in the world. Whereas I feel like the earlier editions, the persistence is really more in the world, right? We're making a shared story about the world and the characters come and go. Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely does. Like that, and I was also kind of thinking about it in terms of like, the earlier editions reflected more of like how the real world kind of works, and the later editions reflect how the world works in a story, whether it's a novel, comic, movie, whatever, right? Because the real world, people die all the time for no reason, no good reason, right? It's just part of it. The life is random.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you don't see rules anymore in the new editions like how to make a will for your character, right? Like that's not a big deal. That was a big deal in old editions. You gotta, how do I pass on my intelligent sword to my next character?
Yeah. You just needed to know these things. How do you feel about 5e now that you're playing so much OD&D?
I like it, honestly. I like it. I had 4th edition is the one edition of the game that I skipped out on. So I played a whole ton of 3rd, and then briefly took a hiatus of that to actually focus on Savage Worlds when 4th edition was around, and I just wasn't happy with that. And when 5th edition came out, honestly, I was a little resistant when it first came out. I did not have a good reaction when it was announced, and now digging into it, I'm actually really enjoying it to the point where I almost think I prefer it to, say, 3rd. I feel like 5th edition is closer to old original stuff than even 3rd was.
For me, the thing was with 5e, it actually took 5e to make me realize the things I missed from AD&D. From when we transitioned to 3rd, right? Because you go from 1st and 2nd, where unless you use like a lot of the splat books, there wasn't a lot of options, right? Like all the characters are kind of similar, the same. You had requirements and restrictions, so there wasn't like a ton of variety compared to 3rd, where it's like we're gonna pick skills and we're gonna pick multi-classing is completely different now, and anybody can play almost anything in comparison to the previous editions. You had feats. So you had like this, like all these choices, and I was like a kid in a candy store, and I was like, "Oh, this is great," because I remember reading the Dragon magazines when they're coming out, and they're like highlighting the different things. But it wasn't until 5th came out that I realized, like that emphasis in 3rd edition on rules instead of rulings, like the previous editions. I was like, you know what, now that you bring it up, I actually do miss those things, and the openness of 5e does kind of limit the amount of arguing that happens over the rules. The really sticking points, the tricky places, are ambiguous, and they do it intentionally. So the DM has to just figure it out for their game,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. So we have a question. Dave wants to know. Do you know about OSR clone RPGs? Would you ever try them?
Yeah, I played a lot of the retro clones. In fact, just last oh my god, it's Monday. Just yesterday, Dan and I did on Wandering DMs an episode on Dungeon Crawl Classics, which is sort of one of those weird hybrid kind of a clone, but then a whole bunch of other kitchen sink elements. But I played a bunch of Labyrinth Lord. I've played Swords and Wizardry. Sure, yeah, played a lot of that stuff. The funny thing is, I think I was playing Labyrinth Lord for a long time, which is a BX clone. And then I started to house rule stuff because I wasn't happy with, I think, maybe the equipment list. And I thought, oh, this is too different from BX. And I kept house ruling stuff until the point of I had I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 page house rule booklet to go alongside Labyrinth Lord. And I realized all I've done is house rule back the stuff that was in BX. Let's just use the old books.
Yeah. At a certain point.
Yeah, I mean, I have them, right? I get the retro clones. I think served a really great purpose to get people into that style of play and make it more accessible at a time when Wizards was not reselling the old books. But if you have the old books, just use them.
How are you enjoying doing actual plays and streaming your games?
I really like it. It is definitely different, right? It's a different mentality, I think, knowing that there's an audience, right? There's this other person at the table that is the audience, and that you're very, I think, conscious of that. So I enjoy it. I don't know. I'm always a bit of a performer. I'm the type of DM who does a lot of funny voices and stuff. So, I like to ham it up.
So are your games recorded or live?
Both. So we stream live to Twitch and YouTube, and then they're archived on YouTube, so you can find all our past episodes on YouTube.
So, do you guys pay attention to the chat while you're running the game?
Not during the game very much. I keep like half an eye on it just in case, especially for those golden moments when your audience tells you, "Hey, the audio's all screwed up."
Yeah. Never happened to me before.
Oh man, why is audio so hard? We keep more an eye on it during the talk shows, like you are right now. I think to sort of bring the conversation in. But honestly, I'm juggling so much during a live actual play where I'm both trying to be a good DM and trying to make sure that all the tech is working. I think trying to watch the comments as well is just a little too much for my brain to handle.
Yeah, I mean it becomes a bit much, and it's a lot more work. I think when I've done stream games, what I tend to do is not, especially if I'm DMing, is not interact in the chat, but I pay attention to it, because sometimes I find they're like, there should be this thing in the game, and I'm like, yeah, there should.
Nice. That's great. I've certainly seen one thing I always thought was really cool is I've seen a fair number of charity streams, especially lately, where they have people donating and through the donations actually causing effects in the game, which I think is super interesting, right?
Yeah,
I'll donate $50 and give the next player a natural 20. That's cool.
Yeah, it definitely brings the audience really into the game that way.
Yeah.
We played a Marvel Phase Rip game on the channel, and the GM for that just decided he was going to let the chat have characters in the game. So they all ended up playing pigeons and rats. and I think maybe even a raven. At some point, the game stopped being about whatever we were doing, and about whatever the chat had going on.
That's funny.
It was funny and bizarre at the same time.
That's very cool.
So BK Dan wants to know: do you play any other games that aren't fantasy, like sci-fi?
My big thing is horror, honestly. So that's, like I said, Dan and I have recently started playing a Call of Cthulhu game in our solo Tuesday games. I love horror. It's unfortunately my favorite part of horror games is doing a lot of prop work, and you can probably even see I've got shelves of them back there. But I used to go to conventions and do very dense, heavy prop work. Where I had a game once where I had a rotary phone on the table that actually worked. and about halfway through the game it rings, and it just absolutely terrifies the players every time, and I love that. And I've not figured out how to do that online, right? That's
Yeah.
unfortunately a piece that's missing in our virtual games these days.
I bet there's other ways to do it that you need virtual props, right? You're in a virtual
Right.
world, you need virtual
Yep.
props. And
Yep.
it's just a matter of figuring that part out. I know because I know people have done different things with green screens and things like that. Um, but the physical props is cool, and terrifying your adventurers with a telephone ringing is super cool.
Yeah, it was pretty fun because I think they all thought it was just there for ambiance, right? Because I for a 4 hour game, it's just been sitting there inert for 2 hours, and then suddenly to have it ring is a nice tension moment.
Is that at a home game or is that at like conventions?
That's conventions. I used to go to a lot of conventions. I would still go to a lot of conventions if I could. So I go to a lot of the local conventions around here in New England. That's Total Con or Carnage on the Mountain. I'm also actually a director on the new convention, Rising Phoenix GameCon, which unfortunately was supposed to have our inaugural event in March, and that did not happen. I'm sorry, April. It was supposed to be April.
I
Yeah.
totally feel you. We were supposed to have Nerdarchy the convention the end of October, and we're just like, this is just too. We decided to push it to the next year,
Yep.
even though it's a ways out from now. We're just like, there's too much going on, and we don't know that people will be recovered enough, financially to
Yeah.
to do something like that. So yeah, I feel your pain.
Yeah, I really miss going to conventions. And I feel like it's probably one of the last things that we're going to get back, right? Because, man, let's just all cram as many people into a small space as you possibly can, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think we're not quite ready for that.
So did
but
you?
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna. I'm fixated on this phone.
Yeah.
Did you get a hard line running to the
Do
phone?
you want to see it? Wait, it's actually sitting right here.
Yeah, that is so cool. Especially.
This is it.
Yeah.
So my favorite thing about this ridiculous phone is I bought this on eBay specifically just because I wanted a rotary phone, and it's for a horror game that's set in 1980s Berlin. So it's got a real spy ambiance to it.
Yeah.
I did not realize it didn't say in the eBay listing that it was going to have this sticker on the front. And so that was a surprise. And let me read to you what the sticker says. It says, "Do not discuss classified information. This telephone is subject to monitoring at all times. Use this telephone constitutes consent to monitoring."
Oh my god, that's so good.
Just love. Yeah, so it's just an actual phone from
Yeah.
the era.
So
which
I'm
I
just
rigged.
envisioning you putting it out at a convention and like some of your players are gonna be like, "Oh, what a nice artifact," and other players are gonna be like, "What is that?"
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's true. Rotary phone for younger players is maybe a little confusing.
Well, have you seen the video where they have kids try and use it, a rotary phone?
No.
Like not kids, I mean like teenagers, and like they have no idea what to do. One of my nephews was like, because they actually have a house line, but they're cordless phones, and they're like, they would keep losing the phones, and they're just like, someone should put a cord on this and attach it to the base so we don't lose it anymore. And I was like, you just went backwards. So that's so good.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, so to push this even, tell you how crazy I get into this stuff. I actually had not only this ancient, 1960s era tech, I had it connected to some 1990s era tech, which was I actually had a phone simulator. It's this piece of hardware that was meant to test phones, to test phone lines. The nice thing is it allows you to wire two phones together. So I had a cordless touch tone phone in my pocket so that I could call it. And I could actually call the other line. And so when it rang and suddenly someone picked it up, I took the cordless out of my pocket and I said, "Excuse me, guys, I have to take this." And I left the room. So then I'm talking to my players via the phone.
That's so cool.
It was just a really nice immersive moment.
Kudos, man. That is pretty awesome.
I definitely go way overboard with that stuff. As long as we're talking about horror, do you mind if I plug my insanity card? So this is another thing
I know. Go ahead. It fits right in there.
Yeah. This is available on the Game Crafter. So this is a generic insanity mechanic that you can put into any system. So I've used this with Call of Cthulhu, with Warhammer Fantasy, with OD&D. Develop this at going to conventions and running these games.
You want to pop some cards out?
Yeah, sure thing.
It's
This is what they look like. There's also this is the jumbo size deck. There's also a normal poker size deck if you like the smaller ones. The notion is there's really each card is a category of insanities, so like paranoia or anger or delusions. And as you play the cards, as you take insanity damage, you play the cards, and it builds up. And each category has different levels of how bad it affects your character, and it gives you little role play hints. So, for example, delusions at level 1, it might say you develop a strange quirk or tick, can be anything you like, a tendency to repeat nonsense phrases, or a physical tick, etc. And then you get up to like hallucinations. A character or person from your past that has no earthly business here appears to you, or maybe the dog can suddenly talk. Have frequent conversations with this person. So it's just ways to like give you a little add that insanity effect, but directly give the player some of those prompts to like here's how to role play it, right? Like here's how to
and that's
emulate that to the
that's
players.
on the DM's Guild.
That's on actually the Game Crafter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So people can get that print on demand.
Yeah. Oh, actually, yeah. So you can buy print copies from the Game Crafter. Also, actually, there's a print and play version that's on Drive Through RPG. If you just want to get a PDF and print it out yourself, won't look as fancy as this, but works.
Nice. That's pretty sweet. Dave wants to know: do you edit your games, and do you have highlight reels?
Do I edit my games? So generally no. Like the live play games, I don't do editing, but I did my Thursday night game, which is called 10 Dead Rats, which is a mashup of OD&D and Warhammer Fantasy. We actually play 2-hour sessions, which continues to confuse one of my players. Actually, my younger brother, Max, every time we play, we get to the 2-hour mark and I say, okay, we're done. Thanks for joining us. And he goes, I thought there were 2 more hours. What's going on?
Yeah.
But we did that very purposely because we thought 4 hours is a bit long. It's a bit long for people to consume.
2 hours online is kind of the sweet spot.
Yeah.
I mean, if you pay attention, if you stream a bunch of games and you pay attention, you'll notice the drop off is the 2-hour mark, right? That's where people start tuning out. It's long. I also feel like when you game online, you kind of like really focus the game, and you end up getting more gaming in. So 2 hours online is easily 3 hours in person.
Yeah, I could see that.
So I mean,
also depends, I think, on the style of game you're playing, right? Are you playing like a lot of combat tactics, or are you playing a game that's more character interaction? Our game, 10 Dead Rats, is definitely much more in that character interaction kind of level of stuff, because it's Warhammer. It's set in the Warhammer world, so the players are consistently in over their heads, and they're just trying to survive. So,
well, also in the earlier editions of the game too, like there was kind of less emphasis on fighting in the sense of solving problems, because if you fought, there was a good chance you're going to need a new character.
Yep.
We just did a video talking about just natural healing through the different editions.
Yep.
Which a lot of that we had even kind of forgotten about. But when you go back to first edition, it was like if you did nothing all day, you got a hit point back. And after 30 days, it bumped up to 5 hit points a day. So it took a while for you to get back into the dungeon.
Yeah, for sure. That's and then also there's been like hit point inflation across the editions, where 1 hit point might have been significant back then, and now is like nothing, right?
Yes.
Also, I like, honestly, we Dan and I play with a house rule in OD&D where our natural healing rate is your level in hit points per week. You need a full week of rest, because we do like to dissuade folks from like what I call the Goldilocks syndrome of like sort of breaking into a dungeon. You're in some evil monster's lair, get halfway through it, and then say, "Oh, we're going to lock ourselves in this room and rest now." Really?
Yeah, we always refer to that as the 5-minute adventuring day. It's like you have one big battle and you're done, and and you, like, so that's the game part of it. Like you can't you can't do that again. So what do you what do you do? It's just part of. I guess it's just part of it. So Dan wants to know, have you ever, or do you play Beyond the Supernatural? It's a horror game set in the 1920s Earth.
I don't know that game. Do you know that game, Dave?
I do not know that game,
Okay.
but there's a lot of games I don't know. So
Yeah, yeah. Which
The-
which is delightful, right? Like I love finding new games. So yeah,
there,
I'll go look at it.
there's so many games I do know that I haven't had a chance to play, let alone the games I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For
Um,
sure.
so what other horror games do you play, or which horror game did you mention? Which horror game you run for the one where you use the phone? I think you did.
So that is what I actually use is Savage Worlds. I use
Okay.
Savage Worlds and my Insanity cards for that. I have to modify Savage Worlds honestly when I do it to make it more deadly and scary because by default Savage Worlds has a lot of get out of jail free kind of effects. So I yank a lot of the rules. Like I get rid of bennies and I get rid of soaking damage just to make it much more deadly so I can amp up that fear level. But really, I'm just looking for something. I just need skills and attributes so that we can roll some dice and test when things succeed and fail, and then we play a lot with the insanity cards.
Do you have any tips other than sanity cards for playing playing horror games?
Any tips for playing horror games? Horror games for me are all about pacing, right? The fact is, when I play horror games, I'm pretty much always playing them as one shots or a very limited duration because my goal is to have everybody die or go insane by the end. I feel like for me that's the fun of horror is watching the players just completely collapse and fall to pieces, and that's not really conducive to long extended campaigns.
No. Yeah,
Yeah,
horror is a difficult genre. One,
yeah,
like you said, it's not really a great genre for a protracted game
yeah.
because, like you said, it's about pacing and mood, and getting the players to buy in. And I feel like you can only do that for so long before everyone kind of gets
Mhm.
mentally and emotionally kind of bankrupt from that.
Yep,
Uh,
yep.
so the impacts get less and less. That's why it's better as a one shot.
Yeah,
Um,
that's my favorite way to play it. I've run it at a lot of conventions, and usually in a convention you're playing it in a 4 hour slot. So my I guess my number one tip is most horror games for me break down into like an investigation phase and then a like everything falls to pieces phase. And if that's about half and half, maybe you'd want to take a little break at 2 hours, give everyone like go to the bathroom or whatnot, and when they're off, dim the lights and bring the mood down and go, okay, here we go, right? I think little physical things like that can really help amp up that tension and make it really sing.
do you try and like intersperse moments of levity within that, or just try and stay in the horror the whole time?
I mean, for sure. Like the funny thing about horror, right, is like if you watch a horror movie, that can actually scare you, right? You get really like very frightened, and you might shout or react emotionally with real fear. And I don't think that really happens in horror role playing games, right? We're sitting around a table, we're rolling plastic dice. It's a little hard to get that level of suspension of disbelief. So I feel like horror role playing is more about mood and just evoking that like, ooh, this is creepy kind of feel, and for sure intersperse that with levity. Absolutely. Like I think the reason I like watching characters go insane or die horribly by the end of a horror game is because in horror gaming we have a lot of that separation of player and character, and we as players delight or maybe even find funny the horrible things that are happening to our characters.
Yeah, I think like that genre is all about the highs and the lows.
Yeah,
Right, so
yeah,
you kind of have to play with that a little bit. It's kind of weird too because RPGs in general is a genre or a form of entertainment that is different than all others because a lot of times when we talk about our experiences, we personalize them. We talk about I, me, us, as opposed to other forms of entertainment and media where we don't do it the same way. When we talk about these things, we talk about them as if we live them. So
mm-hmm.
that's kind of weird, the disconnect there, because when it comes to the horror genre, you don't get the fear and jump scares in the game the way you do like taking it in from a TV show or a movie.
Yeah. It's hard to do. You can do it. You might need a phone to ring, but
Yeah.
you can get those moments, but it's tough. It's really tough. And again, I don't know that it's really completely necessary to have it as much as say like a 2 hour movie where you want like constant edge of the seat like nervousness. Over a 4 hour game that might be exhausting anyway.
Yeah, peaks and valleys. I'm pretty for
Yeah,
sure. I
yeah.
remember like when I was a kid and one of the players was DMing for us, and we did have more of a spookier session, and and it was actually just me and another player and the GM,
Hmm.
and it just so happens we were playing in the basement of his parents' house, and it was cooler, so being chilly helped, and then like his mom had just brought down ice cream, so like we're even colder anyway. And it like
Yeah.
just like I don't know if he planned it or not, but it just fit into the scenes that were going on. It definitely helped it. So there's always like mood things that you can kind of do.
Yeah. Yeah, I love immersion like that in horror games. Your story kind of reminds me of a game I played at Gen Con years ago, which was specifically set in like 1912 exploration of the Arctic. And they had managed to get this little ballroom, just a private ballroom with just one table in it where they're going to run their game. And they had shut the doors and drawn all the blinds. And it's August and it's Milwaukee. And so it's broiling hot out. And when you walked into the room, it was just noticeably cooler. I wouldn't say cold, but noticeably cooler.
Yeah.
And so it immediately kind of got you into that mood of like, all right, we're in the Arctic. And yeah, this is it's a little spooky.
So Dave wants to know if you tried the Jenga Tower in your horror games, like the Dread RPG.
Oh, the Dread RPG. Yeah. I've played Dread. I think that's great. That's a great way to evoke that because now again there's just that nervousness, right, of pulling a block and that physical tension. Adding that into the game, I think, definitely helps. I've played it a bunch of times. I've never actually run it, but it's a lot of fun.
I have not played it, but it's a mechanic we've been really wanting to steal. Which we're doing everything virtually now, so that makes that kind of hard.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like horror is the genre that I'm having the most trouble adapting to online formats. Playing adventure games like D&D, that's just easy, right? Mm-hmm. There's so many great tools out there for it, and it's just much easier to do. I guess maybe because I'm spending less time sweating how to get the right mood into the game.
Yeah, so I guess there's probably a bunch of streams you could check out and see what they're doing to see if anyone's figured it out or not, or or maybe you'll be the guy to figure it out. So, are you guys currently running a Call of Cthulhu?
We are. We started one a couple of weeks ago. We have actually only done one session just through happenstance. We haven't been able to run another one, but we're supposed to do one actually tomorrow night. So
that's always been one I've stayed away from.
Yeah.
I have mixed feelings about wanting to play it, right? Because I'm a fan of I'm a fan of the Lovecraftian stories that he's written. Maybe not him so much, but the other things that he's done of his works, and I just imagine the people that I play with would be like, they would play it like they would try and figure out how to game it and be like, oh, I'm an ex-commando and want to kill the monsters. Which it's like, if you're really a fan of Call of Cthulhu and the Lovecraftian stuff, it's like you said, it's all about how do you die and go insane. If I don't gouge my eyes out with spoons by the end of the session, it's just not going to feel right.
Yeah, for sure. When I'm running it at conventions, I always make a point to set expectations at the very beginning. Before we sit down and play, I say to everyone, I expect by the end of this game for everyone at the table to be dead or insane. Yeah. Right? That is the goal of this game. And just try to get everyone into that same, mood and mentality of that this is where we're headed, right? I think that helps a lot.
I think it has to open up with like some badass Marine guy just kicking the party's ass, right? Like where they really try, but they just can't take him on, and then have a Cthulhian monster show up and just rip him in half
and just tear him up
right away, effortlessly, so that maybe they understand. But I don't know, players can be hardheads. Your mileage may vary,
Yeah. When I talk to Dan about stuff, because horror is not something that he typically runs, but he has a quote where he said that a lot of his D&D games end up becoming horror because they're just so deadly, right? They're just so brutal. I guess you could maybe have if you're going to center your game around Marines, maybe have some extras so that when someone dies in the first 20 minutes, you can go, okay, well now you're Sergeant Number 2. Yeah, you could still play.
There's a pretty decent anthology called World War Cthulhu, and it's just all short stories that are Lovecraftian in nature. but they're just set with war as the backdrop.
Yep.
And in none of them do anyone ever just kill the monster. So
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely when I'm writing scenarios for horror, I often set them in some historical point, not always the 20s. In fact, usually not the 20s for me personally. As I mentioned, I did one in 80s Berlin, but I try to find something, a situation in history that's already terrible, right? That's already horrific, and then add, Cthulhu monsters to it, and just makes it so much worse.
makes sense.
That's a lot of fun.
Dave's chiming in. Cthulhu stats kills die 6 PCs per round. Before they got sued for copyright.
Yeah.
So let's see. Sorry.
So no problem. Let me add a little more for the game we're playing tomorrow night for Tuesday. Again, is we're playing Call of Cthulhu by the book, which is the first time I've ever run it by the book. I'm a tinkerer. I love to change rules. So it's the first time I've just been like, nope, I'm just going to run exactly what's in the book. And it's the first time I've run it with just one player, which I find really interesting because I think that maybe fits horror a little better, right? Like if you think of Lovecraft's stories, they're usually just a single protagonist.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
It's also super intimate. Like it's a way to run a game, for sure. And you're right. That does fit into it more. And I think it's easier when you have that one-on-one connection with one player, one GM, where you don't have the distraction of the rest of the table. It's
really fascinating. It's not a style of play that I ever sought out. I always sort of thought one player, one DM. That sounds weird. I want, I like big tables. When I'm running D&D, I like, 8-10 players at the table. Just one-on-one always felt really weird. But now that we're trapped in our houses, it's actually way easier to organize a one-on-one game, and I'm finding it really fascinating, really exciting. Dan ran for me the O series, which is a D&D game where you're playing a thief that's trying to break into an evil magician's tower. And how often do you get to do that as a thief character in D&D? Actually do the skulking about and breaking and entering and trying to not get caught, right? Like usually your party's going to screw that up, right?
Yeah, the fighter or the paladin in their plate mail is just not going to work out. Yeah. I mean, I will say 5e is the easiest game to run kind of a crime game in, where everyone could play different character classes and it still can kind of work, as opposed to earlier editions where everyone had to be spec'd out. But now you can kind of have skill sets that lend themselves to doing other things, even if you're not that type of character. But no, I see how the one-on-one would definitely make it a lot easier. And I agree. Like, I always felt the same way, that it's kind of weird to play that closely with just one other person, and the word that I always come back to is intimate. It's just like super intimate when it's just you and one other person role playing, and intense, right? Because there's no breaks. When you have a table of people, you have the interactions between the other players to kind of give you a break as a DM. And as a player, you can kind of sit back as the DM does their thing and the other players. But no, you're both just going to be on. How long are those sessions?
2 hours. 2 hours. Actually, an hour and a half. I got that wrong. Yeah. Actually, just an hour and a half long. We started doing it just because, honestly, we just wanted an outlet while we were stuck in our houses. We thought, let's just do something that's just fun, right? Throw away all the rigmarole that we do for our normal stream, right? We have, we set up guests and we do, credit rolls and we do intro sequences. And on Tuesday nights when it's just the two of us playing, we just turn the cameras on and just go. It's much more casual.
So we have some questions coming in about one-on-one play. Kmo wants to know, they want to know your experiences with it, which we kind of just started delving into, but any tips about it?
For one-on-one play, it's any tips? That's interesting. I think you definitely want stuff where you're going to have characters that you could, as a DM, you want to have NPCs in there or monsters or whatever, opponents that can talk to the player, right? So that you have excuses to role play, but not too many of them, right? That's definitely, I've gotten drawn into that where like there's three NPCs in the room and Dan is playing and suddenly like the three NPCs all have to have a conversation with each other. And as DM, I find that really hard to do, right? That's sort of like, all right, you relax. I'm going to have a conversation amongst three characters that I'm all role playing at the same
Yeah, I
time.
I rarely will go. I will not go first person there. That
Yeah,
I've seen other DMs do it and do it well. I am not one of them to sit there and have like these conversations with multiple people
it's really hard.
with myself. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's weird. To the people that do it, kudos. That it's pretty awesome. I am
Yeah.
not one of them.
I'd recommend if you want to look at some cool D&D one-on-one gaming, go check out. I'm sure you can get it on Drive-Thru or DM's Guild or whatever. The O series, which I think is called the Gem and the Staff. It's specifically an adventure written for one DM and one player, where the player is a thief and they get to break into an evil wizard's tower, and it's all the things you always wanted to do with the D&D thief, but never could because of the stupid paladin.
Mess everything up. Dave wants to know, what do you do about scaling for one-on-one play, or are you folks more old school and throw that out the window?
Certainly, if you're writing material for one-on-one play, yeah, you want to scale back the number of opponents, and I think it's worth, like I said in that thief scenario, it's worth considering what kind of character are they going to play, and to give them stuff where that character gets to shine and do the kinds of things that character is really good at, right? But definitely, on the other hand, yes, I am that kind of old school DM where in my campaigns, I've always told my players, like, the world is the world. You can get in over your head. Just always make it possible to run away, I guess. Right.
Yeah, losing doesn't always have to mean dying, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There can be some middle ground depending, like what's going on. I mean, if you get in over your head with a bear, it's probably just going to eat you and you're going to be dead. But if you get in over your head with people, they might have other motives or other uses for you.
Yeah.
So you could definitely go in different directions. I feel like the biggest thing is whether you're talking about one-on-one play or just with a smaller party, it's like, well, you just tell different stories. Like, It doesn't make sense that everything's a dungeon crawl if your only players are two wizards, right?
Yep.
They should be spending more time in libraries, more than likely, or wizard bars, or whatever wizards do. But it should be, it should be tailored to the characters that you're playing. Obviously, if you're running pre-written adventures, that's going to be completely different. But it's just an opportunity to tell different stories.
Yep, I totally agree. You can also consider like multiple characters, like maybe you give your player a henchman, or just a second character or something, so that they have a little more resources to tackle stuff with.
Yeah, so I think in our games we try to stay away from that. I've never been a fan. Like, I mean, it's fine and people can do it, and I mean 5e just put out the essentials, and I think that's all about that, really. Right?
Yeah.
It's having a companion to help you. But, at the same time, I just feel like it's like a lazy solution sometimes for DMs.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it's not wrong. Like, you play the game and enjoy it however you want. But it's just like change up pacing. And it's okay. And there's also a difference between, like, introducing NPCs that will kind of come and go in the story than, like, having someone that adventures with you. Like,
yeah.
Maybe it's an opportunity to introduce a doctor type character into your stories that they get beat up and visit often, and it's someone that gives them a hard time every time as they're stitching them back together so they can do it again, and they're always complaining about how tired of seeing you they are because that's all they do is stitch you back together. I just feel like there might be some other opportunities in there if you kind of look for them.
Yeah, I feel like this is probably a place where like 5th edition and older editions of D&D really actually differ quite a bit. I feel like with 5th edition, the characters have enough going on where you could play a solo game with any one of those classes, and they can probably fulfill most of the, if not all of the roles, right? They can, and those that they can't, you can probably fulfill with a couple of key magic items or whatnot. Whereas in old editions of D&D, it really was about the dynamic of the different classes and how they complement each other. So I've tried it. We played a game once where we had 4 players and we all played magic users, and we just got smeared, just
Yeah.
absolutely smeared. You need the fighter to be the front line to absorb the damage, just as you need the wizard in the back throwing high damaging spells. Like,
Yeah, I know some people get really angry about the concepts of party roles.
hmm,
But I mean, they've been with the game since the very beginning. And then, so I guess what happened was they've been with the game from the very beginning, but then video games adopted it. And so then tabletop RPGs kind of like railed against it once that happened. Especially in 4A when we saw the designers go, oh, RPGs get looted by video games all the time. So what if we just do it back and people understand it and know it, but it just did not work out well at all.
yeah. But if you go too far in the other extreme, right, then you have every character can do everything and nothing makes any individual character special, right?
Yeah.
I feel like everyone at the D&D table wants that moment of, here's where my character shines. Here's where I get to step up, take the spotlight, do something really cool. And I think that's easier when characters have things that they're good at and things that they're bad at.
Yeah, we get a little grognardy sometimes. It's like all the classes now can cast magic, right? Like,
Yeah.
even the barbarian has some magic that he can throw around, and with the one of the later UAs, there's even more magic in that class, and then also when we see classes that are like, oh, now you can use this other stat as an alternate stat to do everything. That definitely that gets us as well. It's like, why do we even have other stats? Why not just have one stat? Right? Everyone will have one good stat, and that's all you need to play the game.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's fun to roleplay characters who are specifically bad at some things. I think that can be just as entertaining as being really good at something.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of the point. Like you pointed out, it's like in 5e you can fill all the roles with any class, right?
Yeah.
So it does make it easier, and then also on top of that, with everyone can innately heal given a chance to catch their breath, and the next day you're good to go. So those are different things. Like we're playing in a game now where one of the things that GM does is if you go to 0 and get knocked down, you get a level of exhaustion.
Mm-hmm.
Which in 5e, that is one of the few rules that they did put in there. It's kind of harsh. It's like you need a super high level spell to get rid of it. So even if you have spellcasters, the chances of getting rid of it aren't great. And you can rest it away, but it's only one level per day, so it's such a brutal mechanic. It's super helpful. The Lord of the Rings game, the One Ring. Oh, it's not the One Ring. Adventures in Middle Earth. For 5e, I played a session in that, and we did the journey part of it. So we went into the adventure with everyone having a level of exhaustion, and we did well on the journey.
Interesting.
Right? Like had we done worse, it would have been even worse. And there's just like all these bad things that can happen. It's like this protracted skill challenge. Mm-hmm. It's actually one of the things I liked kind of least about that game system. But it's like this protracted skill challenge where, if you do moderately well to okay, you still have bad things happen. If you do really bad, you can just like die on the way to the adventure. Which is a little bit old school, but it does make a difference even for just like that one level exhaustion going into the dungeon and your ability checks. You don't realize how much that affects you until you're trying to figure things out and doing puzzles and stuff that require checks. You're like, oh, this is so much harder. But I do think it's a kind of a cool mechanic to introduce, like in that game where exhaustion comes into play if you get dropped, because then it's like finally the players are like, oh well, we need to stop them from going down. It's not like, oh, they got knocked down, we just healing word them back up and we continue like nothing's going on, because after a while that begins to wear on the players and the characters.
I feel like this is sort of an example of one of the reasons I think 5e is more like the older editions than say something like 3rd, right? Things like exhaustion, there's so many tools in the toolkit with 5th, right? There's so many options that you can use or not use, right? There's just more. I feel like it enables the DM more to find the way to play that suits them and suits their players.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, 3rd edition has some other things too, like ability damage, but then I'm like 5e has it too. It just is a lot rarer. Like, and you realize because there's certain monsters, right, that just punch so far above their weight class. Looking at you, Shadow. It's like, how is the world not overrun by shadows? I don't know if you've used them against your players.
No, I
But
haven't.
if you want to
Nasty.
if you want to humble your players, even higher level ones, shadows will do it every time. That strength
Excellent.
damage is no joke.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. I mean, we were recently talking with Keith Alman, who wrote The Monsters Know What They're Doing, which I definitely recommend if you're looking for more ways to torment your players. I've very nearly TPK'd players with a group of goblins using some of the strategies he outlines in those books.
Yeah, like it makes me think Tucker's kobolds. But
Yep.
There is definitely ways to do that. Another one that's a lot of fun are quicklings.
Quicklings. I haven't played with those either.
Oh yeah, they are so brutal. They're only like a challenge 1, but they have a higher armor class. They get a lot of attacks, and their movement is insane. And while moving, they're basically invisible. So I used them against the one party. I'd used them a couple times. So to ratchet it up, I used hasted quicklings against them, which was just insane.
That's great. Double haste. That's wild.
Yeah. Well, they would just run by them and slash at them. And
did your players appreciate the challenge, or were they cursing you the whole time?
They did. They kind of figured out ways to deal with it.
That's good.
So one of my players was a rogue and they're high level. So at a certain point they get blind sense, which their blind sense is even better than blind sight. So the quicklings quickly figured out that they could not run by that character and attack them. They would run near them and then throw stuff.
I feel like that's the thing, right? Is finding that level of challenge that like really pushes your players, but there's still a chance for them to succeed, right? Like feeling like you're in danger, but still overcoming it. That's when the game is just super fun.
They had to do a little bit of running away on that one.
Yeah, I think running away should always be possible, right? I feel like that. I've played with groups who are just like, nope, we're just going to fight to the death every time. Yeah. Really? Come on. There should be an option to escape if you must.
So the solution to that is TPKs.
just beat them down until they learn their lesson.
It is definitely happened in our games. We've had a few. We haven't had them recently, but we've been playing with a different DM who's his style is a little more brutal than what we're used to. And we had a half a TPK, but that's okay. This is just an opportunity to build another character.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like TPK should always be on the table, right? It maybe is not a thing you want to hit your players with every session, but if it's not possible, then the game can be just as unfun, right? Because once you realize that there is no threat of failure, then the glory of success vanishes.
It is a lot less fun. I honestly thought we were going to end up being taken prisoner or something, because I guess I was just thinking like, well, what would I do? Because we were getting our asses handed to us and being taken out, and then so like one of the characters was paralyzed, so the GM just had the thugs come over and off him, and then like anytime someone would go down and the NPCs had an opportunity, they were just taking us out.
Yeah.
So they would just come over, stab us twice, and be done with it. I'm like, oh, I would have done that a little bit different, but that's cool. So
that's fun. I really enjoy those moments as DM where the game has just gone so awry that you have to like take a moment and say, hey, let's take a 5-minute break, everyone, so I can figure out what the heck to do next.
Yeah.
Your story reminded me of a fight where I basically nearly TPK'd my players with a group of goblins, and all my players are unconscious or dead, or not dead, but unconscious, lying on the ground. And I thought, well, the goblin's just going to kill them? That seems anticlimactic. And so I dug through the adventure and I realized, there's a much nastier monster on the other side of the goblin den. I think they're going to tie up the players and chuck them down that way as a sacrifice so that it will stop eating the goblins.
Yeah.
So then we got to play, you wake up bound in this giant cave and something's rumbling.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do that all the time, but doing that once in a while, one, hopefully it teaches the players, hey, there's other ways to solve this. And two, as a DM, it's more interesting than just murdering them every time.
Yep.
Dave wants to know, ever used the character funnel idea out of DCC where the player has multiple 0 level characters, and they choose their characters from the survivors. If
Yeah.
any.
Yeah, I have used the funnel. I've used the funnel running DCC. It's really very interesting, and it can be really fun or terrible. Um, one of the funny things about using the funnel, I don't know, Dave, if you've played
I have
Dungeon Crawl
not.
Classics. Okay, yeah, basically you start the game with 4 0 level characters, and they're terrible. They're really bad, right? They're very much likely going to die. They're fighting with things like a rolling pin or a stray piece of steel they found lying around. And the idea is that all but one of the player's characters are going to die, and the one that survives gets to go up to level 1. Yeah, it's pretty funny, and definitely it gets you very quickly into that flavor of, oh yes, the world is incredibly dangerous and deadly, and I'm gonna have to use my wits to survive.
Very battle royale-esque.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, but you have to be prepared for running that adventure where your group of say 6 players are controlling 24 characters, right? Because they're gonna all get whittled down. So it's a little odd.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot different, but it also there's just something fun about that as well.
Yeah.
Normally I would be against the multiple characters per player, but that is the instance where I'd be like, yeah, this works. It's designed for it.
A lot of characters in over their head is super fun. I played a game at GaryCon where there were 27 players and 1 DM, and we were all playing like 1st and 2nd level characters, and we were in a dungeon that was like easily 6th, 7th level type threats, and so the only way we could survive was by using our numbers to our advantage. And it was just such a weird game, but so much fun. We're doing things like, you come into a huge cavern with a giant rushing river. I guess let's form a human chain, because 27 people can do that.
It's totally a style of play. Bill Webb from Frog God Games always runs these like really big games where it's like an average is like 14 people. And I know you mentioned that earlier. And I remember playing games when we were younger where we had some pretty big tables, and like 13 or 14 was like the max ever. Where it was like you just grabbed whoever you could and played, and the size of our group would kind of fluctuate.
Yeah.
But that seemed like that was like really rare for us. We usually like 4 to 6. It's kind of the optimal. Ted just got done running a game that was bigger, which was like 8. There was 7 or 8 of us, and at one point it was at like 9, and then got whittled down. Like, it's hard to find that many players to consistently show up anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean 4 to 6 is definitely the sweet spot. Sometimes when running convention games, right, because that's when you have the numbers, I'll run 8 or 10 player games, but usually then I'm looking for systems that are very rules light, right? Because the action's got to be snappy in order to deal with that many people at the table.
Yeah, or everyone's just kind of sitting waiting around. So Dave wants to know, was it last year he remembers seeing that game?
Was it last year? It wasn't. So you mentioned it was Bill Webb. It was totally a Bill Webb game that I'm thinking of. He was running it, and we were at GaryCon, so it had to be at least 2 years ago, because we did not go to GaryCon last year. But yeah, it's maybe he runs it every year. It's super fun.
He probably does run it every year. I was at Gamehole Con, and I had played a game with Bill Webb. I spent most of the session just trying to trick the other players into doing the dirty work.
Dan and I played in it together, and we really, when we went in, we were like, this is never going to work. I can't believe he's doing this. And when we came out of that game, we went, that was amazing. We have to play more of this. I think maybe we've just joined some kind of cult.
Yeah. So, he's usually pretty drunk when he's running those games too.
Well, that's a separate.
There's always a drink in his hand and no shoes.
Yeah.
It's an experience. Yeah, I won't say it's for everyone, but everyone should at least try it once.
It's super weird.
Yeah, it is.
A lot of fun though. We had a lot of fun with it. Yeah.
So we're actually past time now. I just noticed.
Great.
These things always fly by so fast. Parting words before we head out, and remember, folks, in the pinned comment, you can find all the links to find Paul around the web.
Awesome. Yeah. Obviously I'm just crazy addicted to this game, and I am out there and trying to get myself involved in as many different things as possible. So do check out my stuff. And if anybody's watching who has something cool that they want to invite me to, let me know.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, Paul. I really appreciate it. And until next time, everyone, stay nerdy.
Thanks.